paperwork. So if you're able to share with somebody next to you, I would be very grateful on that. So I'm going to hand out some paperwork. Thank you. I would love that. So you're going to get 2 sheets. But before we get into that, I think it's so important we begin with prayer. Right about this, see if I got there, fading in and out. May we, while that's being handed out, just take a moment to bow our heads. God, you are so awesome. And Lord, we're in your house. And in this meeting, God, we're asking for you to be present. We're asking, God, that we would listen most of all to you, but also one another. And God, in all things, we want to bring you glory. So we ask, please, in the name of Jesus, that you would grace us with your presence, and you would be here in such a powerful way that we will leave this meeting not thinking it was a business meeting, but understanding, God, that you have been with us. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. If you don't know me, I am Donna Paramore. I'm the district superintendent. I also have with me a colleague I'd like to introduce you to, and that's Reverend Scott Aldrich. And you're going to see his name in that paperwork. And so that's one reason he has been very gracious to come and meet with us. And I understand we're going to have a chance to ask questions. But before we do that, I'd love it if you would allow me to go through, in particular, this document. So let's kind of go through this one first. There's this document. Yeah. So you need the process to disaffiliate, and you need paragraph 2553. Complete 2 things. 2 things. So you should have paragraph 2553 from the Book of Discipline. And you should have the process to disaffiliate. We are good United Methodists, and trees died for this meeting. But I always like it when people have paperwork and can follow along with me, and then you can have it, continue to ask questions, but you would have kind of an understanding of the process, so that when you ask questions, you can refer back to this. And you're also going to be, if you're familiar with some of the process to disaffiliate that happened before annual conference, there's some changes from that process. And I'm going to unpack that as we go along. And part of it came out of our experience from having churches disaffiliate this last quarter, and what we learned and how we realized we needed to change it. So it would be a process that was more understandable, but that there wouldn't be friction in any way throughout this process. And that's our hope. We're all brothers and sisters in Christ. So I want you to remember first that the Book of Discipline has not changed. I hope that's something you know. The Book of Discipline has not changed. You'll see on this first sheet, paragraph 161, section C, says we affirm the sanctity of marriage, the marriage covenant that is expressed in love, mutual support, personal commitment, and shared fidelity between a man and a woman. We support laws in civil society that define marriage as the union of one man and one woman. In that same paragraph in the later section, you can see where it's written, although all persons are sexual beings, whether or not they're married, sexual relations are affirmed only with the covenant of monogamous heterosexual marriage. The United Methodist Church does not condone the practice of homosexuality and considers this practice incompatible with Christian teaching. And then later on in the Book of Discipline, on paragraph 304.3, you can read, the practice of homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. Therefore, self-avowed practicing homosexuals are not to be certified as candidates, ordained as ministers, or appointed to serve in the United Methodist Church. So that is our current Book of Discipline. And I know a lot of people are scared of what could happen, or there may be changes in the Book of Discipline, but one of the reasons I wanted you to read that is because some people have been under the impression the Book of Discipline's already changed. So was this new to you? Or did you all know that? Did you understand that's what we believe as United Methodists?
Forever.
Every 4 years, we can get to debate about it. So I want to unpack. And that's not on our list, but I want to unpack why our polity, that's a fancy word, but why we are organized the way we are as United Methodists. We began as a revival movement in the Church of England. The head of that church was the monarch, the king of England. And we were never designed to be a denomination. We were designed as a revival movement, to help the Church of England to become closer, to have genuine experience, an encounter with Jesus Christ, very evangelical then. And we always thought we would just be a revival movement within the Church of England, but there's this little thing that happened in 1776. And that was the American Revolution. And Methodist, as a revival movement, was here in America. And at the end of that war, Church of England pastors went back to England. And Methodists were, as a part of a revival movement, very much involved in the Church of England, wrote to John Wesley and said, well, what are we going to do? We don't have pastors. We can't receive communion. Nobody can baptize us. Help. Because we don't know if or when we'll ever get Church of England pastors again. And so at the beginning of our nation, Methodists had to figure out how they were going to govern themselves. Remember, they came out of a tradition where the monarch ruled the church. And so Methodists at the Christmas conference of 1784 began to think about how they were going to be organized. There was already a structure in place in Methodism called the General Conference, in terms of Wesley would gather his preachers to talk about what to teach and how to teach. And so the decision was made, we're going to modify that, and we're going to let that be the body that will determine what we believe. There are some certain things that we say are inviolate, and we still, all the way from 1784, continue that belief that there are things that cannot be changed, that we ascribe to. They're called the Articles of Belief. But the structure, I'm going to get back to that. How do we organize ourselves? So the decision was made, and we've lived in this structure for a long time, was that General Conference would be the body that could speak for the Methodist Church. We didn't become united until 1968. But we limited the power of the General Conference by the fact they could not meet on a regular basis or stay in session. I thought I'd cut this off. I hope you will forgive me. So we limited that power. So we've always understood that anybody can bring up anything for vote. We're not like a papal society where somebody can say, well, never bring that vote up again, because what happens is every 4 years somebody says, well, let's talk about it. So the question of, well, that's part of our structure, is that if you could write a resolution if you wanted to go to general conference. Did you know that? Anybody can write a resolution. Maybe that'll help, I don't know. We also created this, we kept the episcopal structure of bishops from the Church of England, but we modified it in the sense that bishops do not serve forever. They have a mandatory retirement age. And we have a judicial council. And so you can kind of see how that almost, it mimics in many ways what the United States was trying to figure out how to govern themselves. And the Methodist Church was trying to figure out how to be structured when coming out of a church primarily governed ultimately by a king. So that's part of the question about, well, you know, are we going to discuss it every 4 years? That's part of our structure, is that people have always been allowed to bring to the floor a resolution. So just like, you know, your city council and your our state government, and you can bring up a resolution forever on that. And that's part of our polity, is that we have believed it's important for people to be able to discuss stuff. So I hope that answered your question. Going back to this process to disaffiliate, you notice I'm encouraging you to study this paragraph. And when we say paragraphs as United Methodists, it's not what your English teacher would have taught you about. It is a longer than that, and we'll have several paragraphs under what we would call normally a paragraph. This is what was voted on to this process in 2019. We had a special call general conference to see if we could have a way forward about this issue. And it was at that general conference where the language was reaffirmed to be conservative. So in 2019, the language of the Book of Discipline was affirmed and reaffirmed to remain what I read to you earlier. But in 2019, there was a process called disaffiliation that would be in effect through the end of 2023. Some people have felt like, well, you know, we're not going to have a general conference till 2024, and and this is ending in 2023. Where's the conspiracy around that? Well, can I tell you there was no conspiracy? The full intention was to have a general conference in 2020. But what happened in 2019? COVID happened. And you know what? We didn't cancel general conference the first time. The city of Minneapolis canceled us. Because huge event centers said, you can't meet here. You can't. Our city's shutting down, and you can't meet here. And you might say, well, why can't we reassemble quickly? I just want us to remember we're a global church. Wrap your mind around the fact we have United Methodists in Russia and United Methodists in Ukraine served by the same bishop in their area. We forget we are a global church with congregations almost in every continent, except for the ones that are, that one that's uninhabited, right? But, I mean, we really are a global church. And so to organize a general conference takes time. And what happened, so we were hoping, let's have it in 20. And then what happened in 21 was, we still had pandemic rules where a lot of delegates couldn't come in because they were our own rules said, you gotta come in, you gotta have shots, you have all of this. We just couldn't manage to get everybody here. And folks, it's important to have people in one place. So if you're thinking, well, why couldn't we have a meeting by Zoom? I don't know about you, I've done a lot of Zoom meetings. I get kicked off of Zoom in Cookville. Okay? You really cannot have that kind of meeting in such a way that would allow you to have a time to pray, talk, and to gather. And so after that time of not being able to get together, we just went on and moved it to 2024. So there was no conspiracy about they're trying to force us to disaffiliate before General Conference. So if you've heard that, that is not what happened, okay? You may not have heard that, but just in case you did, there's that. So I want you to see back on the process to disaffiliate. There are very limited reasons that a congregation may use to disaffiliate. You cannot write a letter to me saying we're scared that the Book of Discipline is going to change. That's not listed in this document for a reason to change. Now, if there is a church that's very liberal, that says we do not like this language of the Book of Discipline, and so we want to leave for reasons of conscience regarding a change in the requirements and provision of the Book of Discipline related to the practice of homosexuality and the ordination or marriage of self-avowed practicing homosexuals as a result. If you're scared that the Book of Discipline is going to become more liberal, you cannot use reason A. You absolutely cannot use that. The only reason a church, if you are a conservative church and you like the way the Book of Discipline is written, the only way you can disaffiliate is by stating that you wish to leave under the actions or inactions of the Tennessee Western Kentucky Annual Conference related to these issues. So I did want to clarify that. You can't say we're scared that we're going to have a vote that's going to change our church in 2024. That's not a reason. So these are the only reasons you can give through the Book of Discipline. Okay? So under number 3, it says, before a congregation wishes to disaffiliate, the congregation must meet with the DS and Reverend Scott Aldridge. Please call the DS to arrange this information. We're doing that tonight. Hey, we're already on number 3, right? So that's what we're doing tonight. And I see that there are people here from other churches other than Homestead and Dorton. Would you all identify yourselves? Stand up and identify yourselves.
Do you want the Dorton to stand up?
No, so hey. So if y'all will tell everybody what churches you're from.
I'm Suzanne Wilson. This is Wendell Wilson. We're from Gracie Catholic.
I know that. I knew that. From Pomona. From Pomona. All right. So tonight, if you want to have this at your church, you'll have to have the same thing. So your being here tonight will not prevent going from the same process. But it's good to see you all. I knew I was recognizing people. I know they haven't changed churches. All right. You'll notice on down on 4, if the congregation wishes to pursue disaffiliation, they have to outline these reasons. You have to say to me in these exact words that you wish to pursue disaffiliation, and email or write a letter outlining which of the two reasons you seek to disaffiliate. Notice who all needs to sign that letter: the pastor parish relations chair, the church council chair, the trustee chair, and the finance chair must sign this document. And then you would email that letter to me, or you can send it to the district, and I've got that information for you on that. You're going to notice when we turn to the next page that Reverend Scott Ulrich, who I've already introduced, you begin to see his name. After I would receive a letter from the congregation asking you to disaffiliate with the reasons spelled out, and again, it cannot include we're scared of what could happen. That's not a reason you can ask for disaffiliation. Then, Scott, you would be sending them documents. You'll know, and there's several documents that would be sent. The first one is Exhibit B, and that would need to be returned to him before any church conference is set. It says copies of deeds to all church properties, including parsonages, must be attached. We cannot proceed without copies of deeds. And I'm going to stop, and you might say, well, boy, that's really technical. Let me give you a background of why we are so insistent on that. I did a disaffiliation meeting, and I just briefly looked at the deed. I thought it looked good. Well, guess what? They gave me the deed to the church cemetery. And I said, well, I can't deed you property. We can't re-deed you property that actually you don't have control over. I need a deed to your church. Well, we don't have a deed to the church. I went through Warren County spent 2 afternoons at Warren County, went through all of their deeds. I feel very good about Warren County now, man. I've gone through, for the name of that church, I went back to the early 1800s. The deed wasn't in Warren County. It was in the state archives. So that's why we're asking you to do the legwork, please, for us. Because you know what happens is sometimes churches, I know this will probably not surprise you. Sometimes churches change names. And that's why we have got to have a copy of the deed. But because of the struggles that we had, I just told you one, multiply that by, we had several deeds that were really a mess. And that's why we've asked for a new exhibit called Exhibit C, for a transfer of local church property free of the United Methodist Church Trust Clause. The local church is responsible for retaining real estate counsel to prepare a quitclaim deed that complies with the standard form that is Exhibit C to the disaffiliation agreement. We just found so many deeds were a mess. And you guys, you want to get this right. So can I tell you another story? I'm a storyteller, so let me tell you another story. Martin's Chapel United Methodist Church, when they closed, said we want to give our property to our sister African American United Methodist Church, Clark United Methodist Church in Denver. You notice it seems to be all in Warren County. I'm telling my stories. Anyway, when we went to look at their deed, the deed had Spring Chapel on it. It certainly didn't have Martin's Chapel United Methodist Church. It didn't have Martin in it at all. And it took money, hiring a lawyer to find out where in the world did the name of the church change. And then we discovered when we looked at the deed, it said it would go back to family members. Well, you know, that deed had been written, you know, over 100 years ago. There was advertising in paper looking for relatives, couldn't find relatives, and it took about 6 months. So I can keep telling you stories like that, but that is why we are asking churches to present very clear deeds and to fill out Exhibit C, and it makes the transfer of property right, and you don't want us going, well, sure, we'll transfer back to you your cemetery property, and you discover 50 years from now things aren't done right. Because then you're just asking for the generation after you to solve that problem. So that is something we are asking for you to do. And that came out of our experiences before the last annual conference. I'm going to get back to number 5 and say it's important for all liabilities and how they're going to be satisfied. So if there's debt, that you tell us how you're going to satisfy that. That the new name of the congregation will be listed on Exhibit B, because if we're going to be transferring the deed back to you, it's not going to say United Methodist Church. So you're going to have to tell us what your new name of your congregation would be. And if you're not going to be incorporated, then the names of the current church trustees must be included along with their name. If you are incorporated, then you have to go through the process through the state of Tennessee to get the incorporation changed to the new name. So let's go down to exhibit, on 7, where I said the congregation is going to send to Reverend Aldridge a list of names and mailing addresses of all professing members of the congregation. And that means even if they live in Wyoming, or if you have no idea, you still list that name of your professing member. And it's going to look strange if you said last year we had, 200 professing members, and you hand Scott a list of 40 people, So we would need to have the 100 the names to match the numbers that have been reported. Scott would ask me next to arrange with the pastor a date for a church conference. It says that the church conference shall be held within 120 days. We're not going to make you wait for months on this, but it does actually involve some scheduling. Because what season is this right now for churches? Starts with a C, then the next word is conference. Church conference! So, yeah, it's a tad busy right now. So there's not a lot of open dates in the calendar. So the process, we will try and make it fair, but it can't happen rapidly. The district office will mail to all professing members an invitation to the church conference. It is a very legal document explaining the process, and the invitation to the meeting must be announced at churches at least 10 days in advance. So the reason why is if you do decide you wish to disaffiliate, you don't want 20 people coming up and saying, we're going to contest that vote, because we did not get an invitation to that meeting. So it's very important. Again, can't stress that enough. We have all of the professing members. It is before the church conference. Reverend Aldridge will provide the congregation with the amount necessary that the congregation must pay to disaffiliate. And I know it may be frustrating to think, well, first of all, I don't have the numbers, but it may be frustrating, and that may be your question later is, hey, Scott, tell us our numbers right now. Tell us our numbers. Come on, come on. But you know what? You may not decide to disaffiliate until 6 months from now. Guess what? The number will have changed. The numbers are calculated every quarter. And that's another thing we learned in our first go through disaffiliations is it's very frustrating if you're told this is your number and then the next quarter comes and it's a different number. So I'm going to ask Scott to explain why the number changes. It actually, the numbers have gone down. So I want him to explain to you because that'll help you understand. We're not being mean when we say, because if you decide 3 or 4 months from now to disaffiliate, the number we gave you isn't going to be your right one.
Hi, everyone. Let's loosen up. Let's not all get so tense. Okay, so here's the thing. So once a church sends item B, and you don't have to list, we don't care about the numbers. We're looking for the name of the account so that if it's released, you guys have written all your accounts, and somebody later says, hey, they owe us $100,000. We gave due cause that you guys are supposed to list it, so we're clear, and you guys have to set that up. So that's the reason why those are listed. The actual numbers, we're not trying to look in the pockets of how much money you have. Most of those, you reported anyway. We're not interested in the numbers. So that's the B, and then we press the A. At that point, when you send Donna a letter that says, we want to go with the formal step, we're ready to really take the next step. We're going to do item B, and now we're going to give you all professing members that we, in our good faith effort, here's everybody we know, everybody's address, and we take these other people. At that point, I get the number from the treasurer, and we tell you the number. The number has dropped since May, and that's based upon what it is that the pension for pastors in their retirement and their families, it's based on that pension liability for that book of business. Meaning, if the whole Methodist Church goes away and somebody buys that book of retirement, Wall Street or whomever, that's what we have to have the money. That's what it costs. And so that was put in 2019 to make sure the cost was covered. The actual disaffiliation costs have gone down this last quarter. They could go back up. I'm told it had something with the bond market and some other things, but they have. So what you usually configure, if you want to, it's usually about 5 times your apportionments, around that number, and then any liabilities that you've had it's 24 months of apportionment, 12 months in the past, 12 in the future, and then that pension liability number. The pension liability number is generally the one that's the highest number. But if you look at it, it's about 5 times the amount of apportionments. Usually, it's close and it can be very few. The thing is that we want to make sure that a church is making a decision based upon their theology or their understanding or whatever their concern is before we give a number. We don't want it to be a money decision. It needs to be a decision that you guys make based upon where you feel like your congregation's at this time and what needs to happen. But if you want to know how many we've done 62. It's less than 3% of our entire church makeup. It affects us about less than 3% of the total budget. That doesn't mean it won't change. So I want you to hear me say, I hate this. You know what I'm saying? I was a district superintendent, had been a district superintendent, was a district superintendent. That's for 8 years. Term limit. So after 8 years, district superintendent's done. That's the maximum you can do because of control, power, and all those sort of things. And so I was put in this role to help walk through this process because I had that experience. I hate this because I just do. I met my wife as United Methodist. My children have been baptized United Methodist and United Methodist in the name of Jesus Christ. This has been the most unusual and difficult season in the last 2 years. I don't know about you all, but it is just crazy. Unless I'm the only one here that it's been COVID. It's just nuts everywhere. Everybody's mad about everything. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying you're mad. I am not at all saying how anybody feels about this issue is right or wrong. Okay? I can tell you, and I'm told God it's on the recording, so it's fine. In my district, I never had anybody that broke any vows related to homosexuality. I had 8 pastors commit adulterous affairs. Okay, I'm just, you know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying? Scott Aldrich, it was on the recording, I'm saying it, is not going to marry anybody who's homosexual. I haven't met any of my pastors that I know of that would, out of all the churches we have, Most of them were in my district. 6 out of 105 were considered very liberal. 6. Are they really liberal? Probably. Most of the churches, as you moved out from Nashville, were blue. I'm just using the politics. I'm not, you know what I'm saying, but mostly blue to purple. People were both sides. In the Methodist church, everybody's was a mixture of both sides of the aisle. And as you moved on out in the country, like we all, you know what I'm saying, people became a little more red. It is an exact mirror of what's happening right now in our world. This whole, I know that Don and I'm not trying to give you a sales pitch on what you should do. At the end of the day, you're going to do what you're going to do, and life is going to move on. My great hope is that whatever you do to make disciples of Jesus Christ. Period. That's what I want. That's one thing. And I will tell you that clergy aren't the ones that are going to be able to lead you into the error. It's you all as laity. They're the ones who have to help us in the world know the love and life of Jesus Christ. I'll tell this quick story, and then I'll answer whatever questions we have. Because I will walk you through the process, but I'm not mad about the process. I mean, I already know what am I mad about? I was DS for 8 years. Everybody got mad at me. That's a joke. It's true. And I was pastor in Columbia. A lot of them got mad at me. I was good for a while. So here's the thing. So I went to a church, and this is one of the incidents that happened. The pastor, male, straight, just saying that, done things that he shouldn't have done. Anybody ever know anybody that does something they shouldn't have done? He quits on the Sunday because we were holding him accountable to an inappropriate behavior. And as you can imagine, there's about a room full of people, and they were upset, so they called the DS and wanted to meet. So I go, and they're mad. Why are we not practicing forgiveness? What has happened? I simply said, he cannot return as the pastor. I'm just sorry. There's penance. It has to be involved. We can't do it. I mean, it's just not going to happen. They were hurt and angry and disappointed. Anybody ever feel all those emotions lately? All of that. So I started doing. I said, well, let's talk about discipleship. Like, let's talk about discipleship in your churches. You know what I'm saying? How many people have come to know Jesus Christ in your church? And I think several of these churches have. When's the last time we had baptism? When's the last time we had kids being baptized? When's the last time we had adults being baptized? When's the last time we have seen people's lives fully being transformed for Jesus Christ? Like, really, like my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and my life's better because of it. I don't know about you, but there's been, anybody else here have cancer other than me? God showed up. And the list goes on and on and on. So I'm at this church, they're upset, and I said, you all know we need to reach out to the community. Like you all. And I said, everybody here believes in Jesus Christ. And they all raised their hand, So I'm going to ask you all, you believe in Jesus Christ, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so then I asked the next question. I said, you've been baptized. Everybody's been baptized, right? I hope everybody's here been baptized, right? I mean, but one person, I'm walking out, she goes, well, I haven't. And she was, over 57. And she sat there and she goes, and I looked at her, I'll pretend you're her. I know you've been baptized, so I have to, yeah. I'm going to use her name Betty. And I said, Betty, well, first of all, I was there for something like this. Well, I was for that talk about let's move forward in the midst of this crisis with your pastor. And I was going to go forward, and I thought, I know I haven't been in the church in a while as a pastor, so I stopped and I said, Betty, you have been baptized? You've been going to church here a long time? She goes, well, yeah. I said, well, do you believe Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior? She goes, absolutely. I said, well, what's kept you from being baptized? She said, no one's asked. And I almost went forward. I didn't catch it. I almost went. And I walked, and I stopped, and I said, well, Betty, would you be baptized right now? Do you want to be baptized right now? And you know how some people get nervous? She goes, well, sure. I would love to be baptized right now. Now I'm like, oh gosh, do I remember how to baptize them? I've been in management too long. So I went back, took an offering plate, took out the phone. This is true. This is true. I'm not making this up. Somebody had a bottle of water. I don't know if they had drank it or not. I don't know if it was half filled. I really don't. And I said, Betty, we're going to come up and we're going to baptize in the name of Jesus Christ. And everybody stood up. And I am not making this up. She said, could somebody get my wheelchair and roll me up? I didn't know she was sitting in the, I didn't see her, her wheelchair. We rolled her up and baptized her. Off of an offering plate, and somebody, I'm sure, half drank water. But at the end of it, the point was this. It doesn't matter what we're not sure of, God is sure of who God is. And so, is that church going to experience some heartache and change? And yes, because they lost the pastor. Will you all, no matter what you do, is it hard to make these decisions on what you do? Absolutely. It will be. I mean, you know what I'm saying? But I know this, no matter what, and you need to hear me say this, there is no tension in me or Donna, that God is God and God is a God of love, and God will right size whatever we don't. It's in the book. It says it at the end of the story. We just forget sometimes, and these times we forget. Now, do I think that this moment in time, the United Methodist Church has been helpful for all this tension and argument and stuff? Yes, I think it's a way to help it be informed. I think it's a good way for discussions to happen and people to give their opinions. Do I think that somebody's going to bring up something at General Conference, whatever again? I'm sure they will. And do I like it? Absolutely not. But you know what? I'd rather hear whose voice it is and with love say, I don't think, well, I don't have no idea what's going to happen in 2024. At 2024, I'll have to make a decision as a clergy. If something's asked me to do that I'm not willing to do. I've already told you what I'm not going to do. But I'm not going to live in fear of that. But I'm not saying that you are. So I don't want anybody to say, well, you're just saying that to flip our switch. I'm not. I'm just telling you that I don't know. And sometimes I'm mad. And sometimes I'm sad. Sometimes I like looking at Facebook. A lot of times I don't. Sometimes I want to turn off the TV. And sometimes I want to turn it on. Does that make sense? And so that's who I am to walk you through. You know what I'm saying? I was a lot of things. I didn't go to ministry until my 30s. So I was just like you, a lay person, got called back to ministry. I met my wife, who's Methodist, you know what I'm saying, who's not a Methodist. Let's be honest, I didn't date her. She's not Methodist, she's hot, but regardless. Put that on there, give that to my wife, let her know I said that. She still is. Anyway, so I don't know how far you want to go in this time, what questions you have.
No, I knew there'd been some frustration that we couldn't give a number, but I always love hearing.
If you'll take the next step, if you all say, we want to disaffiliate, we want to do this stuff, it's okay. I'll give you the number. You know what I'm saying? If that tells me we're going to make this step. I will say this: not everybody. My experience has been so far. It can be very divisive.
Yes.
Okay, in a church. Doesn't mean it's not I'm not saying whatever it turns out is not the right way or the wrong way. I'm not. Maybe you can be right and wrong and right at the same time. I don't know. I do. Whatever list you send to us, let people send me a list of professing faith members. Okay, I'm not proof testing against their books. I'm like, okay, this is the list of accounts. Okay. People have used money that they didn't even use in their accounts, that they've been at the foundation, that they never put in, that's been there 100 years to pay their fees out. Okay. We're not, you got to be who you got to be. I still think there's great hope everywhere. But that's me. Not all the time. So I'll be honest. Most of the time. But there's probably other questions. I'll answer whatever. I'll be as honest as I can. So those numbers. But if you just want if you're saying, well, what is a rough sketch? Just find out. I don't know what your questions. I haven't looked, but I can. Actually, when everybody takes the next steps and sends a professing faith, and they send the list, I tell Larry, and he goes and he doesn't look at it until I tell him. Until we mark it. Actually, it's an Excel spreadsheet. I mark it. I send it to him, and then he goes, gets the number, says, "Here's the number." I send the number to you, your leadership. This is the number, Don. And I say, "This is the number," so that when you vote, if you vote, everybody knows. There's no hidden agenda. And I will say this: but once you vote, it is not official to the annual conference approves it. Okay, so the annual conference approved, I don't think anybody will get up and have a fit. But the annual conference, if there's a special called session that happened, if not, it happened, it'll be official in June, June 30th of 2023. If it happens in this certain time period, and then you'll get that's when the fees or whatever the pension form is paid, you'll get a quick claim deed, QUIT claim deed. And that's that. You have to change the sign, change the name, make sure all the accounts are changed, all the federal members' IDs are changed, and that kind of stuff. But that's the process you just walk through.
So let's continue going through the process. If you're on page 2, look at number 10. The amount he's going to give you, if you choose to do this, is non-negotiable. It is non-negotiable.
Say that,
It is non-negotiable.
what came before non-negotiable?
The figures that he would provide are non-negotiable. Any unpaid apportionments for the year prior to the disaffiliation date, as well as an additional year of apportionments. The church's portion of unfunded pension liability, any past due direct bill pension or health insurance payments, pro rata share of the pastor's salary if the church does not want to continue to use the pastor between the church conference vote and the annual conference disaffiliation vote, and any grant money received from the annual conference within 2 years prior to the disaffiliation date. I want to underscore something that Scott said because I've seen it in person. When the votes are taken, they're going to be in some churches where it's unanimous, but there was a church in this district that took the vote, and it was the difference of 1% in terms of that vote. And I left the church grieving because they realized at the end of it that at least a third of the people were going to be leaving them that night and not coming back. And I watched that 1/3 not speak to anybody, and they left. Asking for a vote does have consequences. There was another church where after the vote was taken, I watched family members at each other's throat. And I grieved because I'm just telling you that the voting is never as easy or as carefree or as united as most people think. The voting, you'll notice on page 3 under 11, only professing members of the congregation present in person at the meeting may vote. You can't go on vacation and say, can I send my ballot in? No, because Scott provides the ballot. So if you're not there, you cannot vote. If you've been attending for 30 years, but you've never made a profession of faith, you cannot vote. And both Scott will ask somebody to help him count the votes. He will keep the ballots. And so why would we ask Scott to keep the ballots? Well, number one, it's a legal matter. But number two, you want people looking in to say, you didn't vote the way I expected you to. I would have sworn you would have voted the same way. And that's why we ask whoever would count the ballots to be extremely confidential, because it is not that common that the votes are unanimous. The motion to disaffiliate only carries if 2/3 of those professing members present vote to disaffiliate. There is an agreement then that would be signed. If the congregation's pastor desires to remain with the congregation after disaffiliating, if the pastor is United Methodist, they must surrender his or her credentials. And we ask, if possible, they be surrendered that night. A United Methodist, the word United Methodist in the Cross and Flame is something that can no longer be used. If you go to Africa and you see the Cross and Flame, you know it's United Methodist. If you go to Estonia and you see the cross and flame, it is United Methodist. It is a trademarked item that globally tells people this is a United Methodist congregation. So when congregations choose to leave the United Methodist Church, they may no longer use the cross and flame. So that is something Scott already alluded to, but that is something we ask. And he also talked about the fact that the annual conference must approve the disaffiliation. We were anticipating that we might have an early church conference before June, and if that is the case, then we will ask for all church conferences to be completed by June 30th. And Scott's already covered the fact that payment of all funds due must be met, or the deeds of the property will not be given. So I know I've given you a lot of facts, but that's what I wanted you to be able to hear the process. But I also hope you hear what I thought Scott said in a very beautiful way. The most important thing is the mission of Jesus Christ. That is the most important thing. And in the discussions that we're having, sometimes it is my fear that we are more worried about our discussions than about the fact there are people in this world who are broken and hurting and who need Jesus Christ. I'm embedded, when I use that word, I think like, journalists with the Army out in a foreign country. I am, my offices are in the Wesley Foundation, and so I'm beginning to see what is happening with our students in college. Most of them are depressed. They tried to go to school through the pandemic. They're frightened about finances. They grew up with the Great Recession. The pressure that they feel like to have, to get their degree right. They're scared. We were talking about the economy earlier. There's just a lot of fear for students. Will they have the right job? And part of what I'm saying for them is that so many of them are not connecting in any church, regardless of what the name is outside the door. And I just grieve that we have not always, in our internal discussions, there are just so many people outside of our doors who don't really understand our discussions, but boy, they want to encounter people who love them and who will introduce them to the Lord and Savior who can make a difference in their life. And so I just want to echo what Scott said about that is something that I share in his heart on that to me is a focus that I don't want anybody to forget in any of these discussions, that we are surrounded by a world of people who really need to know the Lord. So I'm going to stop right there. I've given you the facts, but I also hope you heard Scott's heart and my heart. And some of it was based on just my experiences, but it also is coming from my own sense of what. Let's stay focused on the mission. That would be my prayer and plea for you. So Scott and I are open now for questions. Thank you for listening through. You have all of the paperwork I've given you, but what's some of the questions that you have?
I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
Mostly I'd like to address them to Scott.
Yes.
Wait a minute.
Scott,
Yes, sir.
my name is Tom Pierce, been a very active member of the church.
Yes, sir.
Some of the things you said were very accurate. However, even Donna said, this United Methodist is a world organization.
Yes, sir.
And I have found that according to the Book of Discipline, a lot of pastors outside of our area continue to go against what the Book of Discipline says. Can you offer some explanation to me as to why that's occurring? And what I mean specifically is same-sex marriages, youth pastors that are openly homosexuals, that are teaching young children. How can that be and still have this discipline as we read it right now tonight? And keep in mind, I understand where we are in Tennessee.
Yes, sir.
Go to San Francisco,
Yes, sir.
go to LA, go to Boston, go to Philadelphia, Newark, New Jersey, and it's just the opposite, and we're outnumbered. Just the same thing that caused us not to have prayer in school anymore. One person created that. So if we're going to stick to this book of disciple, how do these people called profess to be pastors at these churches continue to do that?
So, everybody, in this annual conference, I'd like to speak to, you know what I'm saying, in this annual conference, our annual conference, that is not taking place. There was a few years ago, we all know, there was a retired pastor at one of the churches that did a marriage outside somewhere, and then charges were brought against him. And so, as far as our bishop and me as district superintendent and Donna too, anybody that break the discipline in those vows were brought up on charges. And so I don't, it's just like kind of like, what are these other states doing? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I can't control what happens in California. Other annual conferences operate. I will tell you though, the Southeast jurisdiction, I had more churches. We had more churches. I had 106 churches in the district that I served. That's more churches than most annual conferences have outside the Southeast. So I just want to put it in comparison. So I had more churches than most bishops had. And so I don't know the answer to that. I think it's a legitimate concern. The question is that aside from those issues, which you're right, I mean, it's a question that's asked. There's a book, Why the Rules Are Followed. Well, you're right, that they should be. And I do think that come to the head of this conversation of these are going to be enforced. Part of the enforcement mechanisms, I think, weren't thought about before. You know what I'm saying? And honestly, the last few years, this is all new. You know, I mean, this is a new paradigm in the last few years with a lot of things. You know what I'm saying? So I can't really answer that clearly, other than I know how we operate. You know what I'm saying? And it's the same thing. I know that's not a great answer.
No.
I hear what you're saying. There's so much. I don't know, and I think that as we become, now what we do know is the global church is much more, as an overall, as more conservative, but how do we want to, that's a term I don't like to use, however we like to say it, more based upon how we understand, but I know there's a worry like, will that seep into who we are here? You know what I'm saying? Well, that, I can tell you, it has not. We have been as kind and passionate with people, and I think that, you know what I'm saying? I mean, and people's contexts are different. But for me, and Donna, and for the bishop, and for the other DSs, we follow the rule book. First of all, we follow the Bible, I hope. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's the ultimate rule book. But I will say this. The Bible's pretty clear about some of the things it even says about divorce. Jesus himself, and we're grace-filled with that. I mean, I don't, you know what I'm saying? Jesus himself speaks on divorce very clearly. And we show grace. So I just, set up what I'm saying, and I've already told you how I feel about the other issue. I just want to put that in context.
So maybe I can help in some ways, and Scott can correct me.
No, I'm not going to correct you.
Oh, he can.
Not for everybody.
He can. He can. I often need correction. Part of, I think, some of the reason that it goes back to our history, when the Methodist Episcopal Church split in the 1840s, it was over a bishop. Bishop Andrew from South Carolina married somebody who owned slaves. And before that, there had never been a Methodist Episcopal bishop that ever owned slaves. And the outcry from part of the Methodist Episcopal Church was, you need to give up your slaves. And he refused. And because they really felt like he should have been removed as a bishop. And so long before the Civil War, the Methodist Church split. Methodist Episcopal Church split over a bishop. Well, you know what? We Southerners have a long memory. So when the Methodist Episcopal Church and the Methodist Episcopal Church South joined in 1939, the one thing the Southern Church said is, we better have in there, you can never mess with our bishops. We don't want somebody from the west or the north telling us anything about our bishops. So we're going to create a structure that's going to be important when we join. It's going to be called a jurisdiction. And so jurisdictions will elect their own bishops. And nobody will be able to tell us ever again, you didn't like our bishop. Well, in 1939, they never imagined what would happen in the Pacific Northwest. And so that's part of you know, in terms of, glad I could help. So that's part of, you know, some structures need to be addressed on that, but isn't that something that part of what had happened in the past is now impacting us in the future? And in 1930, and so does that help a little bit to understand?
You can't have a United Methodist Church if we all follow the doctrines in Tennessee, and it's a whole different wacko system in California that call themselves the United Methodist Church.
Can you repeat that? We can't hear you in the back.
Right, you have to have a microphone.
Yeah, you know, Mike, I'm sorry, what you
Draper.
Draker said that, he said that you can't have a United Methodist Church in Tennessee when the other.
They can't all be united. If California's doing their thing and San Francisco and wherever else it.
We're United States.
Yeah.
There's different, well, I
And
mean,
that's a United Lesbian Methodist Church in California instead of what we say we're believing in.
yeah.
How can that be united?
That, and I mean, that might be the part of the concern that you might have, and I hear that. You're right. I mean, because I hear you all.
Like what happened to those 7 pastors that did the evil deed? Where are they?
I don't know who you're talking
You
about.
said they had an affair with the church member.
Oh, the ones, the straight men who had an
Well, I thought you were telling me. I said, no, I'm evil, but not evil.
They are no longer in ministry.
They're no longer in
Oh, yeah.
They should be in hell.
Yes, ma'am. The lady with the nice hair.
Hold up, we gotta get a microphone.
I probably won't need a mic.
Yes, you will, because the recording won't pick it up.
They're recording.
I did want to let you know that I am from the Grassy Cove Methodist Church.
What's church?
Grassy Cove.
You need the microphone.
And my one question is, I understand that we can disaffiliate now
Yes,
on these 2 reasons.
yes.
And we're given the B reason because of. So let's say that in 2024, we're still going by our guidelines. Our book of discipline gives us the guidelines that we need to follow.
Yes.
So if they change them and we have not disaffiliated, will we be given the opportunity to disaffiliate then with the same rules and guidelines?
Sorry, there's a follow-up question.
So in that question, we have that standard right now. I think we're probably putting the cart before the horse, but I don't know whether we're going to be given another opportunity. It says that we have to decide by 2023.
Yeah,
So you understand my question?
Yes, ma'am. So in 2019, You know, everybody was arguing this thing, they've been arguing for the last 50 years. And that doesn't surprise you, the council and I see arguing for 400 years, you know what I'm saying? So I mean, arguing in the church about a lot of things happens a long time, a lot of places. So every year, since 1972, this issue's come up and people have argued about it. It's held solid for the last 50 years. But finally, everybody said, you know what, we can't solve this at a general conference with 1,000 or whatever, how many people there. We need to have a special group that comes together, hammers this issue out, let's make our decision, everybody do what they gotta do and go on. So that's the reason why this was written, the way it was 2553. It was written for churches, originally written for churches, really, as you can read the language, for more liberal churches to leave. That's why it was written. Or if you disagree with the discipline, for these reasons you can leave. So that's what it's for. Because we thought General Conference was going to have in 2020. So this subgroup, you might have heard it called the Way Forward. This group comes together. And it was not an official bishop, anybody appointed a group. They came together and it was the liberal group side, the conservative side, and those in the middle. And they said, can we hammer out a plan so we all can agree that at 2020 we'll try to keep our people in place to vote on this plan. One way forward, what the plan was the protocol or whatever the plan was to do this. Everybody goes good. So that they thought that would just be in place. So that way it would be a nice reason for 2553 for people to get out without being too cruel, too hurtful, or whatever. Well, 2020 didn't happen. And then it didn't happen again. COVID happens, politics happens, and everybody then starts getting up on their high horse. And now the discussion is not even the civil discussion. As you know, people are really like going at it hard, you know what I'm saying, with things, which they do. And so for somebody like me who wants people to come together, you know what I'm saying, it's very difficult because everybody is just, I mean, they're picking the worst possible scenario, you know what I'm saying, they're going at each other. And so I don't know what's happening in 2024. I wish I did because I lost some money, like the rest of us, and I'd like it to come back, you know, in my retirement. And so that's what's, I don't know. I know that the process, from what I have gathered, has been, at this point, at least from our perspective, as kind and gentle to not adding anything to, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know.
That's the honest answer,
I don't know.
is to say, we do not know if the church will officially split in 2024.
I don't know.
Because, I mean, if we said that, and we know for sure, well,
I don't know.
we can't say that because it has now been several years past that. The vote to change the Book of Discipline has never gone through. It may be in 2024 that the vote is we will remain with a conservative language and there is no official church split. There is a new denomination that is formed, but there's no guarantee in 2024 that there will be a vote at General Conference to approve that as an official split. So I wish I could say, yeah, you can, you know.
It doesn't sound to me like we're united. We're not united, that's for sure, because we don't believe, many of us don't believe that.
We can't hear it back.
San Francisco.
We can't hear you.
Can't hear you. It's,
It's on.
we don't believe the way the San Francisco and whatever, other places. I mean, there's no way that we believe that, so we're really not united. I think we need to kind of think.
Well, again, you're hearing me say every time we voted on this issue, we've remained with the current language. But you're right in the sense of there are people who are not following the Book of Discipline. But I will say, just like Scott said, they're actually such a small portion of our total global United Methodist Church. I know.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Would you explain, a lot of people have never been to a conference.
Yes, sir. Annual conference.
Annual conference or in the big conference.
Okay.
Can you explain who votes at these conferences and comment on her?
Yes.
We're in the United States, but we're not united either, are we?
So, I'll probably help clear it up because she seems to have much better history than I realized. I did not, I should have paid more attention to Methodist class. So, wow.
Glad I know, I'm glad I know.
I didn't know better, Emory was strong, grammar. So you have, so each church, there's, for every pastor, there's an equal number of lay delegates in the conference. It's even. It's half and half. You know, whatever. So if there's more clergy, that's why you have at-large delegates added, to make the numbers even. So at annual conference, it's not clergy voting, it's both laity and clergy that vote on stuff. Now, laity don't vote on the clergy session, with clergy being elected, but they vote on, everything else is even Steven. In fact, my experience has been the laity more faithful in showing up and voting, and the budget's passed. So your apportionment amounts that are established are done by the annual conference, which passes the budget, which you all, or your representatives from your church, vote on, and they approve it. The same thing happens, you get so many delegates that are elected from your conference that then go in the jurisdiction, that then go to the general conference to vote on stuff. So like you said, jurisdiction is where bishops are elected and other things are done, they have a jurisdiction budget, but the general conference is the one that meets every 4 years, but it's an equal number of lay people and clergy persons from across. In fact, and this is what's interesting about it, like I said, the Southeast has more church, probably more actual churches and more people, but it's balanced out. You have people from Europe and all that sort of thing. So anyway, that's how it works. Does that help, or you need a better, Don might can give it a blank.
And several years ago, I went 2 or 3 years. It seems to me like that one of the problems is a lot of churches don't send anybody to vote. Is that
Thank
correct?
you. That's exactly right. It makes me so frustrated when I go to charge conference after charge conference, and I'll say, where's your person you're nominating to go to annual conference? And they don't send people. And every time churches do that, it hurts, it hurts the entire conference because we don't have people representing each church. And the reason why we ask for at-large delegates for lay people is because our retired clergy who aren't serving still have a vote. And so to have that balance of people, but you're right. I wish churches, every church would send somebody to annual conference. It's so important that happens. Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, I got a couple more.
Okay.
A little more technical now.
Sure.
Oh,
Okay, so,
It's not on.
good.
Is it green?
Nope.
It's green now. Okay, so a couple of questions on the technicalities. It's almost September. January 30th, 2023 is not very far away. And I'm not too good at math, but 120 days taken off that squeezes it down. And now we've got a few more days to get papers together to present to Scott. All of a sudden, we're getting tight on time here. Why hasn't that been adjusted because of the COVID issue too? Since the annual conference was adjusted because of COVID,
yeah.
why can't we
But
adjust that?
we didn't set that. In 2019, we have nothing to do with the rules that was set for that. Yeah, so, yeah.
What is January
Yeah,
30th?
but the dates, okay, so,
It's December 30th.
yeah, no,
So
so,
it said must be completed by.
right, well, no, yeah, so, if you're asking, is there enough time to do a church conference to get the ball rolling, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, so, it's all my, so if you're saying, Scott, you guys are gonna cook us down the road so we can't do it, no. We're gonna, whoever has reached the point that that's what they want to do,
Right.
we're gonna have the church vote. Okay? And from that point, that establishes what happens next. But we're not booth kicking this thing, we're not trying to play games with anybody. The dates are on the calendar. You have to have 10 days notice to do it. We don't feel rushed. Okay, so let's say you have a church vote and you make a decision and it goes whatever way you think it should go. The paperwork part and the deed and all that kind of stuff, all the detailed stuff, that's can be taken care of. We just need the people on top of that. All of that stuff on the back end, you'll get the quick claim deed once all the paperwork stuff is done. That's not gonna, you know what I'm saying, you get it, like right now, some of them are, you know, it might be September, October, November, the next year you get your deed. But as far as the process goes, getting it done, it's done. You're not held out never to have it happen for you.
Okay.
With that, yeah, so I want to, yeah, so there's no, we just, you know, there's a deadline, because they're all trying to get all the stuff together, that's all.
Yeah, okay, so the second part of this is, professing members must be present to vote.
Yes, sir.
If 3 professing members
Yes, sir.
come to the meeting,
Yes, sir.
2 vote to disaffiliate,
Yes, sir.
1 votes to remain, and that's a legal vote.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's just like a church conference, there's a church conference. Of the people with proper, that's the reason why the proper notification and the proper, like, say the Smith family, I don't know if I know a Smith family, so let's say the Smith family, who were members 15 years ago, and their great-great-great-great-grandmother was a member of this church or something, they didn't get notification, they find out that the church decided to disaffiliate, and they didn't know about it, didn't know about the information, didn't know about it, they showed up, they had due cause to bring liability against, they said, we didn't know about it, our family was at this church, and no one notified us. But if there was due effort, we're like, you know what, we sent the 2 addresses, it came back, we honestly, now if there was some sort of inappropriate, we're hiding these professions of faith people back because we don't like the way they think. That's not, everybody has to be notified, everybody has to be told. It's not, you know what I'm saying, I'm not checking and saying, you know, are you mismarried? I hope the person who's the secretary there can identify, or some of it. There are some people who don't have seen people in years, they don't know who they are, you know, I mean, things, but we still have to have that list, so it's a good time to clean up the roll book if you have it, you know, and make sure those are right. But we're not going to proof text those, but we want on the end of the people who think they want to disaffiliate, they need to be transparent as well. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, we want everybody to have a voice in this thing.
So the letter that you'll be mailing out to all members,
Yeah, all professing members, yes, sir.
all members will have an opportunity to read the letter prior to it mailing?
It will clearly state it'll be a sample ballot,
Yeah.
what you're voting on.
Because sometimes letters can persuade people.
No, it is simply a ballot. We are calling a church conference on November 5th at 6 o'clock at blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Here is a sample, here's this for the purpose of disaffiliation, here's the ballot for the vote. That's it. We don't, you know what I'm saying? We're not, me, Don, and our conference has not been disingenuous about anything. Okay? So I want to be careful that there's no accusations that we're going to be disingenuous about sending a letter out. But, okay, I want to be clear about that. I want that to sound as I can. There's no integrity issue with me about this. But we're going to send the letter out the way it is. You know what I'm saying?
And it doesn't say you have to vote this way or the other way. It just simply says there's going to be a vote, and this is what it's going to be about.
And you're voting to leave the United Methodist Church.
And
That's
you
it.
have to be there.
You have to be there. In person. That's
So I want to make sure that, when Scott's right, that there is one exhibit we absolutely have to have before the vote is taken, and that's Exhibit B. So that's one we have to have. But the other exhibits that are requested, like Exhibit C, can be,
yeah, just
after.
Exhibit B, professor member list, and the letter of doc. That's all, all the other exhibits will be filled out in time. We understand, to get somebody to do a clean title on the property,
It takes time.
it takes time.
So the package that's submitted, you decide on how it's affiliation, the package that's submitted does not have to include A, B, and C
You'll have to
all
say
at
that
one
again.
time.
With the microphone.
Okay, so she's asking if we have a disability, at the time of the church conference, we have a disability, if you have a disaffiliation vote. You don't have to have all the paperwork done. Because before we even got there, we had TFs, for professional faith, the B.
Exhibit B.
Yeah, and so you don't, all the other paperwork, the C, I know it's confusing, the C, the title and all that stuff, that takes time to get, you know what I'm saying? And then it's not approved annual conference, whenever the annual conference is called. And so at that, the D, whenever that paperwork gets completed, and it's all clean, the lawyer looks at it to make sure it's all clean, and then we release the trustees. sign off on the releasing and the quick, I would say quick QUIT deed is released to you, and that's it, and you know, that's all.
Exhibit A actually happens at the vote
Yeah,
itself.
we bring Exhibit A with us.
Yeah, so you'd think it's, you know, I don't know who came up with the,
I don't know.
having Exhibit A actually happen after Exhibit B, but, you know, we're recording and I'm saying that. Who are we going to show this to that I said that?
No, I think they did a great job with it. I don't know what you're saying, I think that's Scott. That's Scott.
Yeah, no. So these are good questions, and that's why we're here to clarify. You've heard our hearts, but we want to continue to hear yours.
Any other questions about this paperwork?
Questions. So we've got another question over there. Thank you. And then we have another question over here, so we'll let the ladies go first, okay, Ed?
Not so much about the split, but about the clear title.
Yes, ma'am.
Why are you giving a quit claim instead of a warranty deed? Because the quit claim carries the baggage with it if there are breaks in the chain of title, where a warranty deed.
Well, I realize that it's just that you guys have to do all the paperwork, make sure it's clean. We don't.
And so that's an added expense for us.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is.
Okay, and that's important because we have a problem across the street at our
Yeah.
historic tower
Yeah.
with broken titles. It
Yeah.
can be very costly.
Yeah, no,
And-
it is. So that's the reason why, is because we feel like the church wants to disaffiliate and decided to do that, the added expenses are on them, not on us.
The United Methodist Church owns the building,
It's in trust. It's in trust calls.
so they don't want to warrant
No.
that conveyance.
Now, we're going to release all liability once all that to you all, or what the name of the entity that is placed in, how you do it.
And you're looking at somebody who doesn't know the difference between a quit claim and a warranty, so I'm glad he was able to answer
Yeah.
that.
It can be huge if there's broken chain of title.
Yeah, and some of these older titles, there's a, it's not claim title in a lot of these. That's, there's sometimes they're lost, and there's a cemetery and all this stuff.
So Ed, what's your question? He needs some.
Am I on now?
You're on now.
Okay, I think we've pretty well got our paperwork in order, but on the professing members, we're showing like 74, but when we done the list, we only had 68.
Yeah.
So we'll be,
That's pretty darn close.
that,
Yeah. Can you?
somebody's probably died, but we forgot or something.
On just a side note, have you found out who's passed away, just to clear that up,
No, not, well, that may not be what it is. That's just whenever when Gary was with us, he sent everybody a letter.
Yeah.
And the members that we had 74. But somehow, and usually myself and my man there, Vicky, or somebody done there's been some people either moved their membership but we're within six people.
That's pretty darn good. So that's just why, you all know that every year you can put people on the list and read the names out at charge conference. That's what that list is for, when you read the people's names and remove them from the membership rolls. That's part of it, you can't find them, you read them each year, so that on the third year you can remove them, because you tried, they always can be added back. Like, in other words, it's not like you get removed, you never, what I'm saying? So let's say Miss Smith is removed, and you say, oh my God, we found Miss Smith, and you say, Miss Smith, we removed you, we're sorry. And she goes, what? I want to be back on. And you go, okay. And you put it back on. You know what I'm saying? That's how that works. They're restored to membership on the charge conference, that's all. They're just put back on.
So I'm glad,
Yeah.
so I'm glad Scott clarified that, because when he said clean up your roll, that wasn't a sense of, we're going to go out and take lots of people off. Because you really, it has to happen at charge conference. There has to be 1 year where you list the name, and then you can remove them. I think it's on the second year.
Is it? Okay.
But, so in other words, it's not somebody saying, well, we haven't seen them, let's remove them. There has to be a process for removal of members. And we were laughing about people dying. But I literally, when I was cleaning up rolls at a church, I walked around the church cemetery and found some of the people who were on the roll, and we could take them off because they had died. But that is part of it, is that, so if you see people who you think, well, I haven't been here for a while, but if you haven't removed them at a prior charge conference, we would still have to have those names sent to us. And we got, if don't hand me that, oh, you got it, right?
I want to refer to number 4.
Yes.
Where it says that there's 4 people that must sign the letter.
Yes.
So if all 4 of those did not want to sign the letter, then it doesn't go?
No, you need to note only that the treasurer or SPRC chair refused to sign, and you know what I'm saying, that we have a disagreement in house. It needs to be noted, you know what I'm saying, that somebody didn't want to sign it, or they might say, or you might say, we don't have that many people, we serve as a one church model or something, you know what I'm saying, whatever the reason. We want to make sure that, I didn't want to use Smith, but I used Scott. That Mr. Scott didn't reach out to me, run through this process, send a letter, and he's having a church conference, and everybody else is going, we don't even know what's going on. That there's, you know, there's a due process through the church that, hey, you should call a church meeting, really, and say, we want to make the next steps internally. Are you all okay with this?
I was just clarifying.
Yeah,
All 4 people didn't sign.
Yeah, you can say on there, they refuse to sign, and we say, okay, you know.
So why would we have added that? And you can help me make sure if my memory's faulty. You know, I am older than you. He likes to remind me of that. I am older than he is. But there was earlier, before this last annual conference, a pastor wrote the letter. And, you know, so when they came to have the vote, the congregation didn't understand what was going on. There hadn't been real discussion beforehand, and it was a contentious meeting. And I don't think the vote passed. And so that's one of the reasons we asked that there is a sense that the congregation has, you know, the leadership has signed off and said this, as opposed to going into a meeting where you discover one person has written the letter and asked for the conference. And that's one reason we've asked for us, it added this informational meeting to why we are asking to have this meeting before we begin the process. And some of it is just because of what we learned. And that was one of them, was that we had a church conference that was, and it was not in this district, I will say that. It was very contentious because the leadership had not been really involved in asking for it. So.
Anything else?
Okay,
Yes.
and I'm sure, this is a question and a comment too, but some of these little churches you're dealing with in this, our deed was like in 1949, and one of the best men that ever lived, you know, give the land for our church. And as far as the homosexuality and all that, I don't know if that was the reason, but I'm kind of like Scott, you know, this is Tennessee, I don't think it's going to bother us a whole lot. But someday it may. But back to the little church, you know, there's 3 or 4 words in one sentence there that says, he donated the land for Dorton to have a church.
Right.
You know, and signed to the trustees of the Dorton Church, which, you know, 1949. And now we've come up to 2022, and the United Methodist has got a claim to our property just because it said they give it to the trustees. And now the trustees are members of the United Methodist Church, so they've got a claim to your land and your money, anything you got. And I've got a way worse problem with that than I do the.
Well,
And it could get worse. That could be.
Does anybody try to take your money in the church?
I don't know.
No, really?
I mean,
What?
what's going to happen sometime down the road, you know? I mean, there's got to be a thought there.
Not for me.
So can I explain the trust clause? You know,
Yeah.
historian,
we're
as the
ready.
historian, can I? It goes all the way back to John Wesley. Literally, the trust clause goes all the way back to John Wesley, the one who began the revival movement that became known as Methodism. And he felt very strongly that if churches owned the property, they could begin to tell the pastor, they could say to Tim Lewis, say, you know what, we didn't like that sermon, don't ever preach that again. Don't preach about money, don't step on my toes, do not preach, we're going to tell you what to preach. And so John Wesley felt it was very important that the gospel be unencumbered. And so he asked for the buildings to have a trust clause to say that they are held in trust for the Methodist Church. And the purpose of it was to guarantee that congregations could not have control over the gospel message of Jesus Christ. And so I think what Scott was beginning to say was, in terms of the trust clause, that's the purpose for what it was, and that if churches choose to disaffiliate, and if they've chosen to close, which was the older process before this process came in, we have never denied a church's ability to leave. And this is actually a really cheap process compared to closure. Does that help? And we don't ask for your bank account. Can I tell another story? All right. Hey, I got an audience. I'm going to tell another story. This will give you an idea, because you were concerned about, that sense of, is the denomination going to come after our money? We had a church close this annual conference. I went to their closing meeting. There were 6 remaining members of the church, and we talked for about 2.5, close to 3 hours, and they went through the deed to see, did the property go back to a family member? It did not. They talked about disaffiliation. They talked about whether they wanted to buy the building and stuff like that. And finally, one of the older members of the congregation said, it's time to let go. And they all chose to go to another United Methodist church, and then they took the money. They told me, they said, we've not had a chance to do anything missional for the last 2 years. We're so low in number, we're so scared that, that we needed to save our money in case something happened to the building. And so that's all we've done, is try to protect and take care of our building. And at that same meeting, I felt like I was on holy ground, because they decided at that point how they were going to bless one last act of blessing, which was to give that money to ministries around them. And so that's the attitude we have. There's not this sense of, can we get somebody's money? And I just want to underscore something Scott said, which is, in the end, we are brothers and sisters in Christ. And when we get to heaven, we're not going to talk about disaffiliation. We're going to be around the throne worshiping. And so whatever there is in this process, it is designed to be ultimately to respect that fact. We are brothers and sisters in Christ. And I just don't foresee that there's going to be a change in how we do that. I don't know if that helps Ed or not. I hope I've answered the heart of your question.
Well, I don't think they will be right today, but, we're saying we don't know what's going to happen in 2024. We don't.
Well,
But the way things is looking, I see where a lot of things could happen.
Of course they could, but it hasn't happened. Okay, so she mentioned Dotson Chapel Tornado came through. Dotson Chapel is one of my churches, completely blown down. The property is right in the midst of Nashville. The property is worth a bundle. I mean, it's worth $3-4 million. The insurance on the church was $2.5 million. We didn't take it. The conference didn't take it. We let the church decide what they want to do with it. They put $1.5 million into a child care program for underprivileged children. That's House at Hermitage. took another $1 million from another church that was blown down and used it for that. And when the property is sold in Nashville, they're going to take the money and put it in 3 buckets, all of which are revitalization, has nothing to do with the operational budget at all. So the history of my experience has been, every church has had to close or leave this process. No one's ever been disingenuous. It could have happened, I guess, but I can assure you this, there's enough integrity with people who are on the inside, I guess we're insiders, I'm not going to work or be part of it. Honestly, we don't even know how much money you have when we do charge conference unless you report it. And a lot of times you have a lot more than we ever realize, you have a lot less. Never have we, never. We might say you need to pay your apportionments, but I don't think anybody said, hey, you guys sitting on $1 million, we need it. We don't. I'm sure some of these accounts, but I will say this. Most of the churches that you all have, you didn't build. You might have stewarded them, take care of them, pay for the air conditioning unit, put the paint in the walls. Nobody in this room, I think, actually built any of the churches that we're talking about. They were built a long time before us. And I'm just telling you, it'd be long and hard, and have a real discernment process before I, as a pastor and as a person, am willing to pull a church out of something that I didn't build originally. I'm just telling you, that's my part. I didn't get the land. I didn't pay for the lumber. I didn't have this powerful moment where God said, let me build right here. God didn't speak to me in the field. I have simply been here and been the recipient of love and grace in the church. You may be right. You have to do what's right for you. I'm just telling you, I would really weigh that as a person, for me. We're going a long time, but we're saying it's 7:30. So does anybody have anything else that we can get to?
The protocol for reconciliation, is that on the agenda for 2024? Do we have any idea?
Yeah, we don't know. I have no idea. They're all, whatever's been shared and not been shared, it's all gone up in the basket. Everybody's getting aside. So I can honestly tell you, when I was in camp, I don't know what Donna, because I haven't been there for a couple of months. The bishop, the old man I call, he would tell us everything he knew. And I don't know if we know, I think you guys might know more than we do. I mean, really. And we honestly, and this is the truth, we had a hard year making appointments this year because we didn't have pastors. There's nobody going to ministry. We had a hard time finding pastors for churches. There are one pastor goes away. In the system, we don't have people there's nobody waiting in line anymore. We have no pastor, so we were working on appointments. We had no idea this conversation about this affiliation was taking place. We knew it had started talking about it in the spring, and it's kind of out there. Donna had some. I had none.
Why do you think that?
Is
there fewer persons in the...
They're going to ministry? Well, if you're going to be a United Methodist pastor, it depends on what way you're going through. People aren't as gentle as they used to be on pastors. It's a hard work. A lot of them don't get compensated much. If you're going to be an elder, it's 10 years. You've got to go to undergraduate, graduate, and 3 years of probation. 10 years before you can make, is there any teachers in here? Teacher salary, teacher salary, which at least it gives a place to live. And teachers are dropping out left and right too. It's the same, that's what I'm saying. It's a crisis. And not just us, the Presbyterian, the good old Baptist, the Church of Christ, everybody is struggling. Well, Catholics, yeah, they really, everybody's struggling. We are having a theological crisis with leadership.
So you asked about the protocol. So let's talk about the protocol. Remember I said anybody can bring anything to general conference? Anything can be amended. And so that's the thing, is you ask, will the protocol as it stands now be voted on? I would imagine it may be, But you're hearing me say, and this is something I was saying before 2020, which is there's no, if anybody says it's going to be voted on just the way it is, I'd like to know how they got their information, because anything at the general conference can be amended, changed, or voted down. So I could see some version of the protocol, but you're hearing me say, I don't know. And not all of the parties that helped form the protocol still support it. So that's part of it. So, I mean, he and I can't answer, what's going to happen with that piece of legislation. And if you remember, in 2020, there was more than the protocol that was being offered up for something to be voted on. So even though we discussed the protocol because it became very popular, it won't happen until General Conference actually looks and votes on it. There's more than one legislation. Other questions for us? Y'all know me, you can get a hold of me, and I'll be glad to answer anything, but I also wanted you to meet Scott because, as you could tell, he's a huge part of this process, and that is something that's new. I was the one who was kind of the main person in the district before that, but you can tell Scott's very passionate, and I'm very glad he is a part of this process. So, yeah, we're losing people.
Yeah.
We are losing people.
Pastor, pray for us.
So, may Scott pray, may Scott?
You want me to pray?
Yes,
Okay.
I love
All
that.
right. Well, let's stand. That'll get you up, and then you know you're old. Did you still want me to take the offering up, Pastor? You mentioned earlier. Absolutely. All right, let's. Gracious Lord, this is a weight. We need your help. Before we go any further, gracious God, I just want to stop this night and pray for anyone here that's hurting.
Yes.
Dear Lord, if someone is hurting this room, I ask, dear Lord, that you might take away their pain, or at least help them, dear Lord, to find an ease in that pain. I pray, gracious God, for our nation that seems at odds at everything. I pray for our church, gracious God, many of us who have grown up in it, in the strife. But most especially, dear Lord, I pray for the person, including myself, who maybe has forgotten how much you love us. So the people in this room, dear Lord, if we'll just remember that you love us, and that is enough. All God's people say.
Amen.
Have a good night.